Good afternoon, colleagues. I hope you're all safe and well. A number of you have been in touch to say that you can't make this Tuesday evening's session, or you've had a few technical problems, which I know are being resolved. So what I thought I'd do for this session only is pre-record the lesson, exactly the same slides, exactly the same content as you would have if we were doing this live, but it gives you an opportunity to review this lesson at your own time, and also to have a go at some of the activities that are on Moodle. I would encourage you to log into Moodle because some of the activities which I will refer to are on the Moodle site. We've seen this slide before. I showed it to you last week, but children starting school last September will retire in approximately 2085. And that's really important because our role as part of the leadership team and leading schools and other educational organizations is really important because we're training individuals for jobs that may not have been invented yet. We don't know what the future is going to look like. And the children and young people that we engage with at whatever level within the organization will have to function in society. And really, that's why our role is so important. But what I want us to do is think about what is leadership to start with before we start to go into some of the detail of leadership. So the first thing I want you to do, just have a look at this image and tell me what you see. Well done if you've said two faces looking at each other or a vase stroke goblet. But what about this next image? Again, well done if you said a duck. The duck is looking to the left. So we've got the eye and the bill here. Well done if you said a rabbit as well. The rabbit is looking to the right. Again, there's a nose, eye, and here's its ears. What about this one? Some people find this slightly trickier, but well done if you've said old lady, old woman looking down to the bottom left-hand corner. Here's her nose here, mouth, pointy chin. And it looks like there's some sort of fur around the collar. Well done also if you've said a young woman looking sort of up towards the top left-hand corner. Here's the cheekbone. This person's looking away from us. So there's the nose, you can just see eyelash. There's a hair, and it looks like a feather in the person's hat, sorry. What about this one? So, well done if you've said that a Native American Indian looking to the left, or a snowman looking into a cave. So we can see the fur of the snowman's jacket. It's not really a snowman, is it? Eskimo would probably be a better description. What about this one? Some of you might say a triangle, but actually there is no triangle there. There's three circles with a segment cut out of each, and they've just happened to be arranged to look like there's a triangle there. It's all about the perception, how we see things. And finally, this is our Kanazi square. Again, similar to the triangle, this time 4 circles with a quarter cut out of each of them, ranged in a certain way to look like a square, and you can make the square move. But actually there's no square there. So what we can say is that leadership and management is part based on theory and part based on perception. And our perceptions are informed by our own values and beliefs, and that's supplemented by our experiences. But despite some leadership theories being quite old by today's standard, they're often used to inform new theories. So if you're not sure, just have a quick search for the Nokia phone ringtone, and many of you will recognize the ringtone. But actually, that ringtone, and again, you can search for this, was based on a 1920s Spanish guitar piece. And you have to listen till about 12, 13 seconds into the piece, and then you'll hear the Nokia ringtone. Now, surely Nokia phones, I know they've been around quite a while, but they weren't around in turn of the 20th century. So it's an example of how we take something very old and we adapt and update it. And it's the same with leadership theories. Some of them are very old, but we take them, adapt them, make them appropriate for our current situation. So leadership underpins everything we do. It's the foundation of our organization. And it's been noted by Ofsted back in 2006, 2009, 2012, 2014, I think 2016 as well, around the importance of good leadership. Now, there's different definitions of leadership. There's as many definitions of leadership as there are people writing about leadership. Here's two that I've just randomly pulled out. The first one makes an assumption that involves a social influence process whereby influence is exerted by one person or group over another person or group in order to structure activities. So just have a think about, well, does that talk to you? Does that say anything to you? Whereas the second one talks much more, this is by Peter Northouse, much more around the process of influence of, again, either individuals or groups to achieve a common goal. Now, for me, that second quote stands out to me much more. I can relate to it. It's about achieving this common goal. In terms of management, Kuban talks about it being around maintaining efficiency, being effective, sort of maintaining the status quo, if you like, but makes an important point that actually, while managing, we often exhibit leadership skills as well. And we will quite often hear the terms used interchangeably, but it's something we need to be mindful of, that they are two slightly different things. And different settings, different times call for different responses. So we don't sit there and say, right, Monday morning is my leadership time. I'm going to be inspirational and I'm going to lead the team. Whereas Monday afternoon, I'm doing management stuff. So we don't carve up our day or our week in that way. What we do is go to different situations and we use a range of techniques and skills in order to achieve that particular goal. But what about this as an idea? Leaders work on the system, whereas managers work within the system. So if we take management, managers enact policies, make sure things happen. Whereas leaders are the ones maybe within your school, within your organization, who are setting the policy. They are creating the system. However, we could also argue that actually, depending on where you are within the organizational structure, you are also working within the system. If you're a head teacher within a school, within a MAT, then you might well be a manager working within the system, the MAT being the system. Whereas you might be a leader within your own school, setting the policies for your school. But we can keep taking this up and up, even if you work in an independent, standalone academy, not part of a MAT, not part of a local authority. You can say, well, yes, I am a leader. I'm a leader of that MAT. But you are also a manager working within a system that is set out by the Department for Education. So again, you are still working within a system rather than you don't have that pure autonomy. And even if you are in an independent school, you are still working within the system laid down by government. So the question is, how much autonomy and independence do you actually have? Now, there's an activity on Moodle I would like you to have a go at. So pause the video here and have a go at the leadership and management activity, which is beneath these slides. Well, hopefully you found that activity just as a little bit of fun to get you to think about some of the terminology, some of the words we associate with leadership and management. But what about the idea that leadership is doing the right thing, whereas management is about doing things right? How does that fit with what we know, what we understand? And actually, is there a tension here which hasn't yet been resolved? Because in terms of leaders and leadership, there's lots of things I would like to do right. I would like to do the right thing by my staff, by the children and young people who I have responsibility for. But actually, there's constraints put on me as a leader, so I can't necessarily do the best I want to by those stakeholders, if you like. But there are things which I can do, which are the right things given the constraints. So we've had a little bit of a talk about about different forms of definitions of leadership and management. Let's start to have a look at some of the different approaches to leadership and management. And some of these you're going to be doing already. What we're doing is underpinning your practice with some notions of theory. And we're not going to be able to cover all forms of leadership theory. There are just too many to cover. So what I've done is picked out some of the more prevalent ideas. The first one we're going to look at is distributed leadership. So distributed leadership is probably one of the most common forms of leadership that are out there. And the idea being is that we can't concentrate leadership amongst a small group of individuals at the top of the organization. The senior leadership team can't be the only people within the organization that have sole responsibility for leadership. So what we need to do is move from this very sort of hierarchical structure of leadership where it's all concentrated at the top to a much more flattened structure where leadership is distributed out across the organization. And that is actually quite important because we want to empower staff. We want staff to be responsible. Now, we still hold the accountability for the staff and for their performance, but they need to have some sort of ownership. I like this idea by Splain, who talks about stretching leadership. We're stretching it over the organization. And that to me is sort of quite an interesting idea that we are sort of empowering and stretching leadership over the organization, getting everybody to feel that they have a part to play in the leadership of the organization. There's been a number of discussions around distributed leadership that have been going on for many years. Davies talks about in 2009 this idea of strategic abandonment when looking at distributed leadership. Things that we need to stop doing, not because they don't work. It's just that maybe times have moved on and they are no longer appropriate or fit for purpose. So we have to say, actually, you know what, this new initiative, this new idea, this new direction of travel is the way we should be going with some of these things. But you know what? In order for us to do this, because it's the right thing to be doing, we need to stop doing these activities. Lambert 2011 talks about strategic abandonment being more suited for schools and maybe more suited even for primary schools because you have a smaller workforce. So there's lots of things that come in from whether it's a local authority, central government, the ESFA, from the trust. Some things we have to say, no, actually, you know what? We can't do those because it's not right for our organization. The more staff you have, the more things you can take on board. But within smaller organizations, this is a lot more challenging. So pause the video, have a look on Moodle. There's a video clip. It's getting a little bit dated now, admittedly. It's to do with distributed leadership. It's two head teachers talking about their approach to distributed leadership. And importantly, they talk about some of the challenges, some of their anxieties around this form of leadership. So I hope you found that video useful. There's an article on Moodle, and I think I may have referred to it last week, by Gemma Parker. It was written in 2015, and it's her analysis, her view of distributed leadership and how it's now been growing in sort of, it's been used much more widely and it's become really the dominant form of leadership. But one of the things that's suggested is that maybe actually distributed leadership is an umbrella term. But interestingly, distributed leadership, it doesn't actually tell us what we need to do. It's very conceptual. It's about stretching leadership, as we said, empowering others. But what does that mean on a day-to-day basis? And that's something which she starts to explore to some extent in the article. The next form of leadership I want us to have a look at is systems leadership. Now, some of you will be familiar with systems leadership because you work in multi-academy trusts. Now, I think there's two forms of systems leadership, and they're not really discussed separately. We have systems leadership, and if you like, the traditional notion, which is working across the education system. So that would be working maybe across multiple schools, for example, or working in multidisciplinary teams, which we'll talk about in a minute. So those are very much external systems leaderships. But I think there's an internal systems leadership as well. And for many staff, their careers are quite sort of structured, quite hierarchical. You work up within a functional area, and you would get to a point where you then start to work across the organization. So you might be a finance officer, you then become a finance manager, and then eventually you will sort of start to have a portfolio of responsibilities that might include HR, estates, health and safety, IT, external contracts, things like that. So we end up working sort of across the organization at a certain level. And this, I think, is more internal systems leadership. So it can be quite a complex form of leadership, because actually systems leadership is collective leadership. It's bringing together different people with different backgrounds to achieve a common goal. And also systems leaderships cross boundaries, physical boundaries, so within different physical organizations. So it might be working with different schools within the local area or within the trust, or it could be virtual. Okay, so for example, every local authority by statute has to have a virtual head teacher. The virtual head teacher probably doesn't have a physical building, or almost certainly doesn't, in a purest sense, but they are responsible. They are the notional head teacher responsible for all the children and young people who are either children who are looked after, or um, subject to sort of social care interventions, children in need, that sort of group of children. They will be attending schools within the local authority area. You might have some children who are looked after within your own setting. And while the day-to-day education and behavior management is dealt with by that particular institution, there is a virtual head teacher who has oversight of all the looked after children, all the children in need, all the children subject to child protection plans across the local authority area, to look at how are those children as a cohort performing. So again, they will bring together staff from different settings, different parts of the education world, in order to look at the performance of those particular children and young people. So systems leadership is made up of a number of different aspects. We're going to spend just a couple of minutes looking at each of those. So we've got core values, observations and perceptions, cognition analysis, synthesis, participatory styles, behaviors and actions, and personal qualities. So let's have a look at some of those. So if we have a look at sort of core values, really we're thinking about, okay, so what motivates you? What gets you up in the morning? What really engages those emotions or feelings? We then have to think about, okay, observations and perceptions. What is it that we're seeing? Because are we looking at the parts of the picture, or are we looking at the whole picture? And what can you see from your vantage point? And this is important. We're going to come back to this when we look at the critical incident analysis, because this is actually what we call the hermeneutic circle. We can't see the whole organization or we can't understand the whole organization unless we see the parts, the constituent parts. But if we can only see the constituent parts, we can't possibly see the whole organization. So they're sort of interdependent on each other. And different people will see different parts of the organization. So it's about what we can see and what our perception is. Systems leadership is complex, is challenging, is intellectually demanding. It requires us to be able to process information quickly, focus on the salient points, understand the big picture. And it requires us to connect with other people who have different professional backgrounds to us. We are there because of our professional background, not because we're the most senior person within the organization. We're there because we have knowledge, particular knowledge, which can help influence this process, this situation we're trying to resolve. So we need to have empathy, we need to have understanding, we need to be honest, transparent, authentic, all those leadership skills, leadership attributes which you practice day in, day out. Technical skills are important, but they're not the most important thing. It's your leadership skills. It's how you're going to work as part of that team to solve the situation, or make the situation sort of move it forward. You need to be able to influence people. You need to infuse and empower people to make those changes. And you need to be motivated. You need to have energy, drive, determination. You need to have bravery. You need to be able to think creatively and outside of the box. You need to be willing to take measured and controlled risks, because actually you're dealing with complex situations. It might be you're working with a sort of team around a child, team around a family, a child and family with maybe very complex needs. It might be an SEND pupil. So you'll be working with the local authorities SEND team, the educational psychologists, the education welfare officers, the maybe a number of teachers within the school. There may be somebody from health attending as well, particularly if there's sort of therapeutic input around speech and language, occupational health. That's an example of a multidisciplinary team working to support a child and their family. Interesting, can be exciting, certainly challenging. The next idea is sustainable leadership. And sustainable leadership is growing in popularity, but it's a new form of leadership compared to something like distributed leadership. The earliest forms of sustainable leadership only go back to sort of 2006, 2007. And it's about developing individuals from deep within the organization who have that skills, desire, capability to be leaders. Because actually, we want to ensure that there are sufficient individuals progressing through the organization to take on leadership roles. That's why quite often there is a gap in leadership. People struggle to recruit into certain roles. But by developing individuals deep within the organization, if senior leaders are not available, they're not around for whatever reason, decisions can still be made. We are not simply waiting for the head teacher or yourselves to get back into school to make the decision. It's about developing that capacity. It's often linked incorrectly, I think, with succession planning because it's not much bigger than succession planning. So, a couple of important points. We need to model the leadership behaviours we wish to see in others. How many of you or your head teachers go round school and if you see some litter, you will pick it up? There's two reasons why we should do this. One is because we don't want untidy premises. And two, if it's good enough for you to pick up, if it's something that you're willing to do or your head teacher is willing to do, then it's about modeling those behaviors. So everybody else should be able to pick up that litter. And it's amazing how many organizations I go around where staff would just step over or knock to one side the empty can or whatever it might be. We are quite good at developing our deputies. However, how good are they at developing the individuals that report to them? We have a moral responsibility to develop and train our staff, and that needs to cascade all the way down through the organization, but it must be done in a framework. You cannot simply send somebody on a 2-day training course and expect them to implement what they've learned. They need that space to take that information and then think about how they're going to apply it within their organization. And also, we can't just pass tasks on to other people and say, oh, it's good CPD for you. That's just us offloading work. We've probably all had it done to ourselves. We've possibly done it to staff we work with. I know certainly having to attend local authority meetings, which went on quite late into the evening, 9, 10 o'clock in the evening, and being told it's good CPD for you. CPD is good if it's done in a framework and not just a passing off of tasks. So there's a number of people who are thinking about this. We've got the Lights, Hargreaves and Fink really are the authority on sustainable leadership. They come up with the first actual model, which was really described as sustainable leadership. And then you'll find that the likes of Brent Davies has developed a model as well. So there's different people who've got different ideas. And what you'll see, and this isn't mapped directly like for like, you'll see that some of the ideas will appear in in different models. So, for example, this dual commitment to short and long-term results in Fulham's model, there's also something very similar around building long-term objectives from short-term goals. Hill also said something again about balance of long and short-term goals. When we get to depth, we're looking at, again, building capacity of staff, capacity through networks, those sorts of ideas. It's about more than just giving somebody a task, calling it CPD. This is about how am I going to build an organization that long outlives the staff that are here, that long outlives the children and young people who are attending the school. This is about ensuring the long-term sustainability of the organization by ensuring we have leaders and individuals who can step into leadership roles in a way that ensures that they know exactly what they're getting themselves into. It's too late appointing somebody into a leadership role only to find out that they don't have the skills to do that role, or actually they don't want the necessary role that they've been appointed into. It's very difficult to get rid of those staff, frankly. So we need to ensure that we're appointing the best member of staff. And the bigger the pool that we can recruit from, because we've been developing those staff, the better it's going to be for our organizations. So we've looked at some different ideas around leadership, around management. We've looked at a couple of different models: distributed leadership, systems leadership, and sustainable leadership. So in terms of activities, this is our leadership and management quiz. And what you can do, you can make this bigger actually. You drag the things to left and right. Let's drag that one over there. And then there's a button at the bottom where you can check to see how many you've got right or wrong. There's an article here. I think this is a National College article, which you can have a read of. And then if you want to put any comments about what you've read, do you agree or disagree with it, then you can put them in the chat facility there. This is the video I referred to when I said to pause the video you're currently watching. This is a distributed leadership video, which I think it will be worthwhile for you to watch. It's about 10-12 minutes long. Gemma Parker's article on distributed leadership. And finally, there's an article here on different ways we can categorize leadership. What does it actually mean day to day? And here's a little article you can have a read of. Again, the articles we're trying to put up are slightly more practitioner focused. They're slightly easier to read than some of the stuff that we come across. So I hope you enjoy the activities this week. Like I say, we're doing this as sort of a one-off. I'm not going to be pre-recording every session, because the following week we're going to have a look at the interesting topic of culture. And with that, there will be a lot more discussion in terms of what we mean by culture and different culture models. So I look forward to seeing you then. If you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to drop me an email. Remember, my email address is s.lambert@chester.ac.uk. I look forward to seeing you then.